All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Declassifying the Dark Archive. This is our panel all about the Dark Archive, our summer release for the Pathfinder rulebook line. I'm James Case, senior designer at Paizo, and I was the project lead for this book. And with me are some cool people to help talk about the paranormal. First up, we have Avi.
Hi, I'm Avi Kool. I'm lead editor at Paizo, and I was one of the two edit leads on this book.
Cool. And next we have Logan.
Hi, I'm Logan Bonner. I'm the Pathfinder lead designer, and I did a lot of passes on this book, though James was the one in charge.
And last but not least, we have Tessa.
Hello, I'm Tessa Newton. Up until very recently, I was an editor at Paizo. I am still contracting, and I was co-edit lead on this book. And I'm so excited to show you guys some really cool stuff from it today.
Yeah, I think we're all super excited for this book. It's a book all about the paranormal, and it is very weird. And let's take a look at the final cover, which we have here,
Yes.
and which I recently learned we had a preview copy of in the store, so I got to see the physical. Yeah, so this is Dark Archive. This is 224 pages, all about the paranormal. It is coming out at Gen Con. And some of you who have been, especially in Orc Play, might recognize the name Dark Archive. Kind of in Pathfinder lore, this was a faction all about, secrets, mysteries, kind of plumbing the depths of all the weird stuff that happens on Galarian. But it doesn't exist in the Pathfinder Society anymore. Not quite. It was sort of absorbed into the rest of the factions at some point, and kind of the premise of this book is that what if one person just grabbed some of the files as the doors were being shut and just booked it with these last couple case files? Tessa, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about this person?
I would absolutely love to. The narrator, I guess, sort of the narrator, the writer of the Dark Archive in universe on Galarian, is a character known by initials KHW. He's a really cool character, and like James said, he used to be a member of the Pathfinder Dark Archive faction, and he didn't like where things were sort of going organizationally, and he decided to abscond with these case files that, for some reason, always kind of he felt something about them. He could never solve them, but he felt they were connected. And one of the things that James is letting me talk about this right now, because James and I worked together really closely to kind of establish sort of the tone for our point of view character, the writer behind the book. And he's so cool. I love him. He's a big nerd. And he's a very interesting character with secrets of his own and stuff. And I'm excited for you all to meet him.
Yeah, Tessa did a lot of work establishing his voice, and I think it's really cool, and sort of in the tradition of books like the one Logan did a lot with, that just came out with Book of the Dead, for instance.
Yeah,
So
very much so.
we'll get to the 8 case files later, but of course, if you're going to delve into the paranormal, first you need to train yourself up. And so there's a lot of stuff in this book, but two of the big things, as you all know, are the 2 new classes. So first off, we have the Psychic, and we have the Thaumaturge. And I think we have a picture of them encountering the unknown here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like this piece a lot. I think it's just like, sometimes you run into something and you don't know what that is. So we had a playtest back in the last fall, like we've had with with all of our classes. And I just want to take a moment to say thanks to everybody for participating in the playtest. We got a lot of really good feedback, a lot of really great responses, and that let us move forward and develop the classes and sort of see where they were going and see where they might need to adjust a little bit. And so they both got a lot of love. So we have two. We have the psychic and the thaumaturge. So I used to be an editor, so let's just go alphabetically and start with the psychic. So the psychic is one of the two new classes. They are a occult spellcaster. I think we have a picture of the new iconic here. If some of you were at the keynote, I think you might have gotten a look at him earlier. Yeah, there we go. This is Thalion. He is our new iconic psychic. He is a painter from Rahadum, and he is an elf. So I really like him. Linda Zayas Palmer did the backstory for this, and of course we have some great art by Wayne Reynolds. The psychic has changed quite a lot since the playtest. They're still an occult caster, and they still have this focus on sort of where a lot of classes have maybe a choice that you make, such as a wizard's thesis or a sorcerer's bloodline. The psychic splits this into a subconscious mind that's where they get their power, and a conscious mind that's something more like telekinesis or something more like telepathy or how they do it. We've had a lot of changes to the psychic since the playtest. I think some of them are just that the subconscious mind is now a little bit of a more how am I going to say this? The subconscious mind is a little bit of a more straightforward ability where it sets whether you can cast with intelligence for some of them, where you're a more precise psychic, or charisma, which has to do with generally a more sort of emotions and abstract sort of sense of power. Their ability to go into this essentially kind of rage state called Unleashed Psyche is something that they can get into a lot more consistently now. I know in the playtest, you kind of needed to work up to it a lot. And we were like, nah, you should just be able to kind of unleash your power after a little bit of shorter time. And they now have a large number of abilities that they can use while their psyche is unleashed, that are things like just dealing some damage or kind of soothing their allies' thoughts to kind of help them a bit. And of course, they still have a signature ability to cast a bunch of cantrips. And then, unlike other classes that might have specific focus spells, they can spend focus points to amp their cantrips to make them do more stuff or to give them more abilities. In here, we have a list of all of the subconscious and conscious minds coming. In the final one, there's 4 subconsciouses: emotional acceptance, which is all about your feelings; gathered lore, which is an intelligence-based ability where they kind of, you're like formally trained at a psychic institute; precise discipline, where you use a lot of where you have a very kind of hard handle on your powers; and wandering reverie, where you're kind of just, you daydream a lot. You might think, oh, I wish I had that glass of water, and then it floats over to you. So this is where you get your power. And then your conscious mind is what you do with it. So we have the 3 from the playtest: Distant Grasp, which is all telekinesis; Infinite Eye, which is clairvoyance; and Silent Whisper, which is telepathy. And we have 3 new ones, which are the Oscillating Wave, which has to do with basically moving energy from one place to another. You can either kind of slow things, you can either kind of cool things or burn them. It's your very kind of energy-based one. Tangible Dream, which is the one of our iconic psychic Thalion, where you project objects made out of force, like walls or blades or bubbles; and Unbound Step, which has to do with teleportation, phasing, space bending, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of new options. I think there's a total of 24 you can make just with these adjustments, not even bringing in your feats and that kind of thing. And your subconscious mind will give you cool abilities to use in your psyche, and your conscious mind will give you all of your spells and your special cantrips and that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to the psychic a lot. I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with that. So that is our class that kind of like unleashes the unknown. They use these unknown powers. Our second class is one that, is more about studying it. And for this, I think I'm going to turn things over to Logan and Avi. So do you want to tell us about the thaumaturge?
Sure. I'll start off by talking about the kind of the overview of the class here. So the thaumaturge, as you saw in the playtest, is kind of the class that knows a bunch of stuff and hoards a bunch of items and trinkets and tools and other esoterica that they can use to make the most of their knowledge and use that against their enemies. And there are different ways that they do that, but a lot of it is like, I found just the right thing to fight this demon, so I pull out this sliver of weird stuff I picked up 3 years ago in a market in Absalom, and combine it with this rare herb that I harvested this morning to make the perfect antidote to fight off this monster. They still have that was kind of the feel in the playtest, and that's still preserved in the final one. So most of what we changed was kind of to make it run a little better and play a little better at the table, and to kind of keep expanding on things. The main thing here is, and you can see from the iconic, which I'll have Avi talk about in just a moment here, that it's just like you can just be completely loaded up with stuff. Yeah, there you go. There's Mios. They're wearing, I mean, they look like a tank basically, or like a walking cabinet. And there's you can see that like every piece of gear is like ornate and has this backstory, and we really want to encourage that with people playing their characters to like come up with a little story for every single strange thing you're doing, because one of the ideas of the thaumaturge is like, you don't necessarily go about your stuff the same way as anybody else. Like if 3 different wizards all went to the same wizard school, they might cast fireball in the same way, but a thaumaturge is going to have just whatever haphazard collection of thrift shop junk they picked up, that they can use to the party's advantage. Avi, do you want to talk in more depth about Mios, our iconic thaumaturge?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mios is from Califas in Ustalav, which is a pretty grim place and kind of sets the tone for the character growing up in this environment where everything is pretty sinister all the time. And so Mios gets into a near-death experience that will set them on the road to becoming a thaumaturge by the way that they save themselves. So using different implements, different cures for protecting themselves makes them realize that they have this power to get to control the world around them in really unusual ways using the things that they find. So I got to write the iconic, the Meet the Iconic, and got to work with James Case to develop the character. It was super awesome. I can't wait for you all to see the Meet the Iconic fiction.
Yeah. I see Paper Ninja in chat is saying that they can't wait to see what people's character art looks like for the thaumaturge. And I know I was seeing a couple of around the playtest. There's a very good Hobgoblin one I saw somewhere. That was great. I can't remember the artist off the top of my head, but it was very good. So yeah.
This is this is a character concept where it's like, oh, we need somebody covered in gear, and we have Wayne Reynolds doing our art. I think we got this.
I think he'll manage. Yeah. Yeah. So Mios's implement, which you can see in that image, is the lantern, but there's a bunch of other implements as well. Logan, do you want to kind of run us through the new ones and kind of summarize?
Sure, I'll go for that. So there's kind of a big 3 theme throughout this class, that gives us 3 active implements, 3 active ones, 3 active implements that you kind of use against something on your turn, 3 reactive ones that let you react to something they do, and then 3 passive ones that kind of give you a benefit all the time. So you can kind of pick your play style with that. You can see from this list that there are several new implements. We have the bell, the mirror, regalia, and a tome. Mios's implement there pretty clearly is that lantern. The lantern is all about is the kind of thing that they would need where they grew up, I think. But some of the new ones, like the regalia, is kind of fancy stuff you wear if you want to have like an even nicer get up, or maybe be like a noble person or a socialite or something. It's something that could fit into your story really well. The tome is all about recording things and having knowledge at hand. The bell has like different tones you can ring on it, so that's kind of a fun one. And then the mirror, which I did a little bit of a spoiler on one of our previous Paizo lives, lets you make a mirror duplicate of yourself, so you can kind of be in two places at once. So there are a lot of different ways to play the thaumaturge, and a lot of variety. Like even in the playtest, we had quite a bit of variety, and we just kind of like, what is another play style we could get so we can really make those characters stand out from one another as much as possible.
Yeah, and they, of course, have their pretty signature ability to, they identify the weakness of a creature, whether that's like, oh, that's a werewolf, I know that that has silver, and then they use silver against a creature to deal just really a lot of damage, like they are a martial character through and through. Or if it's something that's a little more esoteric, they have this kind of ability to make up a weakness. The one that Mark Cypher was very fond of is if you're fighting, if you're fighting something like a devil that's all about imprisonment, you can use like a broken chain, and that creates like this sort of like conceptual connection. And then you're like, well, because this chain is broken, it harms you. And it's kind of that theme that we have in a lot of monsters, where you can kind of play on their weaknesses to deal extra damage. So those two.
That's the one where it's like, there's not a normal weakness, but I can find something.
Yeah,
don't worry.
I know
I'll find what you're allergic to.
There's a good thread on the forum coming up with sort of these what you would use against what creatures, and it's just there's a lot of kind of narrative room for expression there. That's a lot of fun. So those are our two classes. We have a spellcaster who uses the unknown, and we have a more martial and skills-based character who kind of just researches it and knows how to dismantle it. So that's what you do to get yourself trained up as a Dark Archivist. But then we also have these 8 case files to go through. So let's take a look at the final list here. These are the stolen case files, and these are the 8 things that we'll be seeing in the Dark Archive. We have cryptids, which I think is pretty classic. Secret societies. We have deviant abilities, which are spontaneous supernatural abilities that kind of can't be explained. Mirrors and imposters for all of your duplicates and doppelganger shenanigans. Cults, which focuses a lot on like ancient and lost religion. Curses and pacts. Temporal anomalies, and Mindscapes. And I just want to shout out these icons that that the art director on this project, Sonia Morris, did. I think that they are just absolutely fantastic, and they really help to set the tone of things. Each file here kind of begins with some in-universe writing by this KHW, this archivist, who kind of goes off and like he goes through the files that have been kind of reported from archivists all over Galarian about this. The scope is very global. We have a lot in the Inner Sea, but we may just as easily hear about something that went down somewhere in Casmaron, or somewhere in Arcadia, or somewhere in Tian Sha. And then the middle of each case file will give you all sorts of mechanics, whether that's systems that a GM can use, or whether that's player archetypes or new spells or items. And then it concludes with a mini adventure. So basically, you first learn about this paranormal thing, then you get all these options to help play with the thing, and then you have to like go in and experience the thing. So we have one of those for each of the case files. So let's take a walk through them here. First up, we have cryptids. Tessa, do you want to tell us a bit about cryptids?
I would absolutely love to. Cryptids are very near and dear to my heart. I consider myself a cryptid. Shout outs to all the cryptids in chat. I wanted to tell a little sort of a little anecdote from when we were like brainstorming Dark Archive, and kind of get to, and this will also share some stuff about like the sort of idea of the book overall as well. But there's so many things in the Pathfinder setting. There's so many pieces of cataloged magic and different planes of existence and all of these various things. And none of these things they might be uncommon, they might be rare, but they're not unheard of. They're not inexplicable. And so when we sat down
we know that people can cast Fireball, right?
Exactly. And so when we sat down to like look at, okay, so what is in a book about things people don't know? well, what are those creatures like? What are those spells like? What are the things that even in a world with magic and the rest, people can't explain? And I think that that is such a cool hook. James did an amazing job leading those brainstorms and coming up with all this stuff. And cryptids, the whole cryptids section is sort of about the ways that cryptids themselves and other strange creatures like them kind of leave indelible marks on the mortals that they encounter. We have, archetypes and feats for people who have, brushed up with various kinds of cryptids, and the sort of the abilities that result from these things are oftentimes very much indicate the kind of creature that you that you encountered. There is cryptid gear in here, so like if you slay a terrible impossible monster and then take its teeth, maybe that does something. Who's to say? It's really, really cool. I also love the art that we popped up there.
Can we go back to that art for a second? Yeah.
If we can go up really quickly, it's so good. I want to say the name of this thing, if that's quite all right.
Yeah, go for it.
This is the rumored owl bear. It's not just an owl bear. It's a rumor of an owl bear. And rumored is one of the various different kinds of like cryptid adjustments that we've whipped up here for sort of, sure, this creature defies explanation or logic, but why? Where did it come from? Was it the result of, terrible experiments? Did people just talk about it enough to, give rise to it, like our friend the owl bear here? It's such cool stuff, and I really like that this is the first case file too, because it's sort of, I feel like it's a very tangible expression of the unknown. It's a thing, and you don't know what it is, but it's out there somewhere. Very spooky.
Yeah, this is great. So that's how we're going to enter the case files. Logan, do you want to take the next one?
Sure. The next case file is Secret Societies. And this one, it starts out telling you kind of the general idea of why secret societies exist and their structure, and then goes into some specific ones that are on the world of Galarian. A lot of those are ones that you've heard about before in first edition or other products, and then there's some new stuff in there as well. One of the cool things about the format of this book is it can really we have a lot of mixing of the old and the new that can really give you a broad picture of each of these the subjects of these case files. This section I think is especially suited for like rogues and bards, because there's a lot of like sneaking around and diplomacy and secrecy around the secret societies. The last one may be a little obvious. And then some of the tools that you get in there include secret society gear, which is pretty cool because it's kind of like spycraft items. There's a lot of like self-destructing notes and ink that disappears, false bottom mugs, that kind of thing, stuff that you can use to communicate or identify yourself as a secret society member. Speaking of which, we have a section on getting membership into a secret society. We have services that you can get from secret societies. So there's a lot of stuff that shows, if this is a communal structure that you're getting involved with, here's what it can do for you. So you can incorporate that into your game and role play it out. The other thing that we have in here are some skill feats that a lot of them are similar to some of the occult skill unlocks from Occult Adventures. They're kind of in the same vein. So if you're familiar with that book from first edition, you'll get the basic sense of this. So this lets you like take a skill feat to use psychometry to kind of figure out what happened to an item by reading its psychic impressions. And that's something you can do without necessarily even needing a spell to do it.
Yeah, I think we have an art here here. Yeah, Quinn is getting a vision.
Tapping into the history of this item. So this is a pretty cool option for people who aren't necessarily spellcasters, but can develop these techniques through training and maybe some secret society shenanigans. so that they can get a little bit of occultism in their life.
Yeah. Michael Raccoon, who is one of the cover authors on this book, along with myself and Mark Seifter, did the lore for this. He did a lot of stuff in this book, but the lore on this goes really deep into like kind of this structure, whether it's very hierarchical, whether it's like a little bit more like cell-based, that I think really helps to set the tone there.
Yeah.
For sure. So this was kind of a what if you're just a normal person who has to get together, you know, with other people to deal with the paranormal, and the next case file is the exact opposite of that. The next one we have is Deviant abilities. These are supernatural powers that are not, you know, that are not classical magic. They're not blessed by a deity. They're not even, you have magical blood from like an ancestor. This is just, you walked by a weird monolith and now you can do some stuff. I think we have a good picture here kind of illustrating, you know, Valeros for some reason can now do a thing that Valeros usually can't. These deviant abilities are kind of a persistent thing you can use in your campaign, much like Wellspring Magic or Persistent Magic. They give you some, basically, they give you a certain type of supernatural ability. So one of them is called Dragon. Dragon type abilities can basically all are about energy. There you shoot energy out of your eyes, or you breathe it out of your mouth, or you can, you know, absorb it into yourself and all that kind of thing. But of course, one of the hallmarks of these abilities, when we were doing our internal brainstorm, I asked, you know, is it like, does it feel more paranormal if you have these abilities, or does it feel more, and you can just kind of use them, or does it feel more paranormal if you can, you know, there's something weird about using them. They feel kind of like you shouldn't be using them. And overwhelmingly, everybody was like, no, we want to have the thing where we, you know, bleed out the nose a little bit when we use our powers. So these are very unstable. You can use them, but kind of the more you use them, the more you chance that you might have some sort of backlash. You can either incorporate these into a character for just like a short period of time. Like, you know, you walk by the creepy monolith and you get the power to project your spirit out of your body. But, you know, once you leave the monolith, that power may not stay with you. Or you can build them in as a kind of longer term part of your progression. It kind of just depends on how you as a GM want to use them. And this section also contains some of the new spells that are kind of based off power users. Some of these are things we have for like the psychic. So, you know, we needed a little bit, we needed some more spells that had to do with, you know, we just needed some more telekinesis, for instance. And some of them are some returning ones from first edition, like etheric shards, for instance. So yeah, these are unstable supernatural powers. Avi, why don't you take us into the next file?
Yes, the next case file is the Mirrors file, which is near and dear to my heart because I got to write the adventure for it. But it starts off with a little bit of lore, like all the case files do, and then goes straight into a huge selection of mirror-related and hazards. And so this is a great chapter for GMs, in addition to being good for players. So things like a classic kind of Hall of Mirrors situation. And then we also in here have a very cool new versatile heritage, which is what this picture is here. The mirror duplicate versatile heritage, you can have a few different origins. If you take this versatile heritage, either you could be a mirror duplicate, you could be a clone, or you could be risen from some kind of polymorph magic gone wrong. And then the adventure in this chapter, I can't say much about it, but basically it is a haunted house with a twist. So it has a lot in common with a standard dungeon crawl, but there are differences mechanically and role-playing wise that will make it a little bit unexpected for players. So it should be fun.
I really like the reflection versatile heritage here. You get some pretty fun abilities, and there's a sidebar about, you know, like maybe if you're playing as a reflection and you get kind of too deep into the role, maybe you get into conflicts with, you know, whoever the original person you're based off of as. It's pretty tropey. You do not have to have a goatee if you do not want to, I suppose. The next file we have is about cults. This is a file I was super excited for. I think that cults are very classic in fantasy, but there's also a lot of views of cults that I think uh, are also very interesting. Sol, one of our editors, wrote a lot of the lore for the cult case file and went really deep into things like, what is a cult when you really get back to it? And it's like a Greek kind of mystery cult, or like a religion that people used to practice that isn't really practiced anymore. So where secret societies are about kind of this sort of more mundane people coming together with just kind of skills and gear and knowledge, the cults are very much about interacting with the divine in just a very weird way. So one thing that we put on the product page here is what happens when, cults kind of go wrong a little bit, which is the living vessel archetype, which we have some very cool art of. We can get up here. Yeah, the living vessel archetype is an archetype that happens when an entity that is much more powerful than a mortal gets kind of sealed into a mortal, or chooses a mortal as sort of an avatar of some kind. The living vessel is kind of like the Sterling Dynamo in Guns and Gears, if you're familiar with that, in that there's some things that kind of you can do no matter what your entity is. Maybe your entity is a fae, or maybe it's a demon, or maybe it's an old one. And those are shared. And then you also have some abilities that are specific. So this here is very clearly our kind of like Lovecraft inspired old one. And this, the unique ability for this one is they can like reach out and grab you. And when they do, it starts to deal like mental damage and confuse you and that kind of thing. But if you're a fae, that might mean you shatter into many like laughing duplicates of yourself. It kind of just depends. The other thing we have in here that's a little more to this kind of like older, more classical version of cults is apocryphal divine magic. These are focus spells, like any other focus spell that a cleric or other divine spellcasters can take. But these deal with kind of these like older and more forgotten and maybe sometimes a little more abstract or symbolic associations. So where for instance, the fire domain spells that we currently have are about shooting fire and, deflecting fire around you and that kind of thing. But the Cinder Gaze spell here is about gazing into flames and kind of seeing portents of the future. There's one that I like that's called Frenzied Revelry, which belongs to the Indulgence domain. It's very like Bacchanalia. That gives a bonus to mental effects. And if you or your allies critically succeed against mental effects, you basically all kind of get swept up more and your bonuses increase. We also have some cool rituals in here that kind of speak to that theme as well. This kind of, like you're all getting together to do a larger, more ceremonial kind of magic. Similar in some ways, but definitely a distinct thing are curses. Avi, you want to talk about curses and pacts?
Yes, so we have curses and pacts together in one chapter because there is a bit of overlap in how we've decided to present them. So it starts off with a Pacts rare witch patron, which is a super fun one because it's kind of role-playing based in a lot of ways. It's about how you interact with with NPCs and can basically trap them into situations where they have to be non-combative with you, or else they take penalties.
I think
We also
Shay called that focus spell Over the Coals, which I really like.
Yes, Over the Coals is a really good name. And then we have cursed items. We've got some art of cursed item here. On the left, we have the really horrifying golden goose, which the way this works is you feed it a bloody heart and it lays an egg worth 50 gold. But if you feed it a bloody heart that you specifically from someone you killed in order to feed it to the golden goose, you get more money for doing worse murder. So that is a delightful item. On the right, we have the key to the stomach, which is a brand new type of item category called bargain contracts. So you might remember contracts coming up in Lost Omens Legends in the Abrogale, oh wow, Thrune section. Easy for me to say.
We've all done it.
In that book. Yeah. And so this is kind of inspired by that, except it goes in a different direction where you make a pact with an entity and it places a curse on you, but also you can activate a benefit from it. So that key to the stomach, the entity can neutralize any consumables that you take and use them for themselves, but also once a day, not always, but also you can use it to neutralize poisons yourself. So you get one thing and you lose another is kind of the idea of those. We also have a new category called Tempted Curse, which is similar to the bargain contracts, but less permanent. And so there's one like where it makes your skin fall off, but it prevents you from taking, or it gives you resistance to bleed damage. So just it's kind of a gnarly chapter, which is really fun.
One of the things that I really like about this chapter is, in Pathfinder, curses are kind of, they're a negative, right? They're things like, oh, I have a bag of holding. Oh no, everything is weasels now. They're kind of just inherently. Oh, Tessa, did you not know about the bag of weasels?
I didn't know about the bag of weasels. Now I do.
But like cursed items have always been very much just kind of only a debuff, and we see that in a lot of fiction, but we also see things like I was cursed with immortality, and I was like, well, that's a curse, but that's also very convenient sometimes. Or I was cursed with a black hole in my hand, and be like, well, that's very convenient. Mm-hmm. So the kind of the bargain contracts and the tempted curses are a way to kind of get that flavor of, well, I have a curse and the curse is definitely negative, but there are ways I can kind of lean into it to my benefit. Next, let us get nonlinear. Next, we have temporal anomalies.
I love to get nonlinear. Yes, temporal anomalies. A very cool part of this book, and is all about the various ways that time has gotten all junked up across Golarion. And one of my favorite things about this chapter, specifically about the lore parts of this chapter, is that it's not just one. That would have been so boring. It's not like, there's one sort of explanation of like timelines and, the ways in which that gets messed up. It's all sorts of kinds of things. Weird little pockets that show up across the world that make no sense. A place where the next day is always fire day. It's great. But the really cool stuff in here, I think, is the ways that we've like mechanically expressed messing around with time. I think this is a really hard thing to do in games, especially like cooperative games, games that you play with other people. And James and Logan and the rest of the design team, I think, knocked it really out of the park. Because it's all about like how time's effects can be adjusted. Because of course that's what we're allowing players to do is, they have the power to adjust time and its flow and things with these various spells. My personal favorite of the new temporal spells, just like, there's these, wild creatures that ward timelines against, meddling, and you get to just call one up and have it say hey and probably do some really messed up stuff.
I think we have some part of one of them here,
Oh yeah. Yes. I'm pretty sure this is Awaken Entropy, which is basically you create a space where where time moves faster, much, much faster. And things in the world don't particularly like time. They like time in the amount that they usually get them. And even then it erodes them over time. So that you can imagine how destructive that is. We then also have two archetypes. We have the Time Mage and the Chrono Skimmer, each with a little bit of a different flavor. Time Mage, it's focusing on studying time, on figuring out how it works, and as magic distorts time, how those sort of ripple out and have effects on timelines and cause people to get caught in the spaces between moments and things like that. And that's still sort of rooted in on Galarian. And then Chronoskimmer, I really love. I would like to share a really brief quote from the beginning because I think of its sort of like flavor, because I think it's beautiful. Most beings are carried downstream inexorably by time like a leaf floating on a river. Now you stand on the banks of the river, watching the flow, choosing where to dive in or even defying the current, at least for a short while, as you skim its surface and skip from moment to moment. As a chronoskimmer, time is yours to exploit. I love that. I love that. So
The
cool.
lore and mechanics intersection, I think the authors just really did a great job on this here. The Time Mage, the Time Mage is an archetype, and the archetypes always have a dedication feat that tells you, how you might have gotten to learn to be an archer, or learn to be a, beastmaster. And the Time Mage, which was written by Dan Cascone, what it just says, you are not a Time Mage now, but in the future you will be. And some of that knowledge starts to kind of leak back to you in the past, which is that, like,
Oh,
that's
that's
just
right.
great. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
The Time Mage is just like one of the Time Mage things is you can like you're like, oh, I don't know this spell yet, but I will.
Yeah. Logan, why don't
I
you
want to just
take us to the Oh, Avi?
yeah, I just really want to call out the prose writing in this book is probably my favorite of any book
It's
that we
really
published,
good. Yeah.
just in terms of the character and the voice. And it's always a little bit curious and a little bit skeptical as well. So
Mhm.
that is really
I
fun.
think that's really the strength of this book is how seamlessly like James led us to weaving together the narrative aspects of it with all of the things that you actually use throughout the game, like as you actually play as these characters and play through these stories. It's really cool.
I mean, this was 100% the lore writers and the other designers on this project. This had a very large number of people on the project, and they all did a really great job on it. We have one more file. Logan, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I'll finish out and now we're into the bewildering metaphysical realms part of this, going from temporal anomalies to mindscapes. So mindscapes are environments entirely contained within a thinking or dreaming or psychically powerful mind. This concept was in first edition as well, so this is another one where you're going to see some of the parts of that carried forward. So it starts off talking about like what are mindscapes, what are some different types of mindscapes, what is it like to be inside one, because it's pretty different from being in the corporeal world, and what are the limitations of mindscapes, and then it goes. We've got some rules for using rituals to create mindscapes or to try to create a mindscape door to get into or out of a mindscape, and we have, because a mindscape is essentially similar to like a plane or a extra dimensional area. It's kind of its own thing, but it's similar to those in scope. We have a stat block for what a mindscape looks like, so you can kind of get those basic ideas down. And then we talk about psychic duels, which are, similar to the duels in Game Mastery Guide. It's like we are going to go into our minds and we are going to fight it out entirely psychically. One of the cool things about what we did with second edition is we introduced mental damage. So now we have kind of a spot where you can cast a fireball in someone's mind and it still kind of has the same end effect of a fireball, and you can knock somebody out in the real world by through this psychic duel. One of the other things we did in this, similar to like a spell casting duel has its own rules and setup, and a physical duel has its own rules and setup. A psychic duel also does, and you can use a mental skill to roll initiative and get a special benefit based around that skill. So, for example, if you're trying to keep your guard up, you might use perception to create your armor of insight to help you against attacks. Or if you're going into this duel angry, you might use intimidation to create Ayer's Spear to kind of go more aggro. We also talk about we have some adjustments to your attacks and defenses, and kind of anybody entering this is using the power of their mind, even if they don't necessarily do that in their day to day. Like a barbarian isn't usually going around showing off their mental capabilities, but in a psychic duel, they're going to get some magic, a natural psychic spell that's related to what they rolled to enter this. And they're so that means that even if a psychic is going up against a barbarian, the barbarian won't be entirely defenseless and just get stomped. It's more like if they engage in the real world, the barbarian would have the advantage, and in the psychic plane, the psychic's going to have the advantage. We also talk a fair amount about kind of building the imagery of a psychic duel, because so many things are up to your imagination. So I think it'll be a really fun type of encounter that you can incorporate into a game.
So those are the 8 case files, but each one of them ends with this little micro adventure that will kind of like they're short. They're meant to be played in 1 or 2 if you really want to spend the time. Sessions, they take place at a single level, and kind of like what we did with something like Doomsday Dawn, they each hop around from level to level. And they take place all over Galarian. And I'm just going to throw up a list of the 8 micro adventures to give you a hint of what's coming here. We have The Beast of Birchfrost by Rigby Bendel. We have Shaking the Helping Hand by Jabari Weathers. A Song of Making and Unmaking by Luis Loza. Lady of the Harvest by Avi Kool. The Verdure of Iblados by Banana Chan. Wishes in Krasnoprudny by Michael Raccoon. Tomorrow's Feast by Quinn Murphy, and The Last Dream by Sen HHS and myself. I think these are really cool. They each have a very different, they each take you to a different paranormal trope, and they each have like a very different tone. Some are more explory, some are just kind of a straight up dungeon delve. Some have some very weird things we haven't really done too much in Pathfinder, and they kind of weave you into this paranormal narrative that goes all across Galarian. And the last thing I want to talk about before we go into some really brief Q&As is that we have these 8 case files, and these are big, right? These are large parts of the book, but we also have a number of incident reports. These incident reports are just 1-page reports from an archivist associated with the Dark Archive telling us about like one thing that happened. These were all completely just open to pitches from the authors, and then we worked with the authors to kind of nail down a sort of like what's a classic paranormal theme, but not one that we're devoting a full case file to, and how can we get into this? As The Woodpile by Quinn Murphy. This takes place in Garand and has to deal with kind of a thing related to Kunrasu, so you can see. So each one has a report, and then it gives you one thing. Maybe that's an item, maybe that's a spell, maybe that's a feat that kind of relates to that. So this is a way to kind of give a bit of a taste of more paranormal things. And if you're playing, the kind of micro adventures all back to back, and you need maybe to just get some more XP for your level for your group or something, and you're a GM, maybe you can take one of these incident reports and kind of build a little bit of a one-shot or a campaign around it. So you can either use them as a springing off point or just as kind of a view into Galarian. So that's the Dark Archive. It's a cool book. It is full of some very weird stuff, and we're very excited to share it with everyone. I think we have time for maybe just a couple of questions before we go on. I've been looking at a couple, but you can put them into the chat if you have any. We'll try to get to them. I saw one here, Logan, about the ability score for the thaumaturge and how that kind of intersects with the class. Do you want to maybe take that?
Sure. Is that the gist of it, or is there a little more detail?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, just asking if it's.
So the thaumaturge uses charisma. We've made a couple tweaks to kind of how they use it, particularly related to kind of the recall knowledge ability that they had in the playtest. So what we've done is given them a esoteric lore, which is kind of in the vein of bardic lore, that they can use to recall knowledge about haunts, curses, and creatures of any type, but not about other subjects. And they get to use their charisma modifier on their esoteric lore checks. So they kind of have a kind of an intuitive grasp of this knowledge, that they don't necessarily need to have the highest intelligence in order to call up this information. And then that's what they primarily use for some of their other abilities that require specialized knowledge, is they get to make an esoteric lore check instead of a different type of skill.
Cool. I have one here asking about the Pact binder. That was something that was in the thaumaturge in the playtest, and I know in the kind of post playtest, we said we kind of moved it out. I think the Pact binder is in the curses and pacts section. Avi, did you get a chance to take a look at that? No?
Yeah, let me just pull that up. The Pact binder. Sorry, scrolling through PDF live. Yeah,
Page
the Pact
166.
binder. Thank you. The Pact binder archetype is basically it's like a social kind of archetype. It's a role playing archetype, I would say, that basically you can make pacts with different entities. So it really is the kind of thing where your GM is going to work with you in order to find situations in which you can make pacts with different creatures, like whether it's a fae or a dragon or anything like that. And these feats allow you to gain powers from those different pacts that you make with creatures that you encounter in your adventures.
There's a question here about the rarity for the two time archetypes. The time mage is uncommon, and the chronoskimmer is rare. This is kind of because the chronoskimmer, in the world of Galarian, time magic is not unheard of. Everyone has haste, everyone has slow. This is not unheard of, but kind of falling out of the time stream altogether is just, in the Galarian setting at least, is just a little more of a weird thing. I think that in terms of kind of how they narratively and mechanically intersect, they're maybe on a similar level of complexity, but of course the rarity for Galarian is kind of the baseline of the setting. Are there any Fulu in this book? Not specifically, but one thing I really like about Thaumaturge is that the kind of lore for the Thaumaturge is very global. They're kind of a very sort of magpie. So they have some stuff that's taken from English folklore, but they also have some stuff that's taken from kind of Chinese superstition or some Native American superstitions kind of things. And they kind of use a little bit. It's not really a major part of the thing, but it's just given as examples of flavor. There's kind of the three sample arts that we have for both the psychic and the thaumaturge. I think they're both three very different views on kind of what you can do with that character. Unfortunately, this was kind of a long panel and we have a lot of questions. We are going to be in the Q&A in the Discord. So if we couldn't get to you, I'm sorry, but please, we will all be there afterwards and we'll try to answer some questions there. Just to go over this, this book comes out right now. This is our summer release, so this should be coming out in time for Gen Con, global shipping chains holding together, hopefully. And we will be coming out with the iconic fictions for Mios and for Thalion coming up in the next month to 2 months, which I'm very excited to meet these characters. And a lot of really cool freelance writers and designers and artists worked on this book. So I don't know if you liked anything in this panel and you want to go shout them out somewhere. I highly recommend you do that. They all did a fantastic job on this, and I cannot wait for everybody to see this. Cool. Well, that's it. I hope you had some fun kind of looking into the paranormal mysteries here. And we will see you in the Discord. So take care, everyone.
See you there.
Bye.